presentation. However, if you do have a question, if you click on the participants button at the bottom of the page, when it brings up on the right-hand side the raise your hand or raise hand, you can ask questions along the way utilizing that feature. So make sure you're aware of where that is. And if you do have any questions, just raise your hand and we will engage you in that way. So without further ado, I want to thank Dawn for the time and effort that she's put in this morning to be with us. And just want to say we appreciate her very much, and everything that she does as part of our Realtor family as an affiliate member. And just hope that this is a great morning for everybody to learn and get a little more knowledge and understanding of the issues of radon. So Dawn, thank you for being here.
Oh, good morning and thank you. This is truly my pleasure, guys. And speaking of family, when you say the Realtor family, this board is so near and dear to my heart. What a great group of people in that area. I'll tell you, way back when, I know that things are crazy with COVID and us being apart right now, but you guys are some of the best giving people I know. I had an accident 16 years ago when we were kind of newer in the home inspection industry, and this group of realtors at this board came together and like took care of my whole family, bringing meals over, and some people even came over and cleaned up my house. There was a realtor's family took care of our newborn baby at the time for 6 entire months. I mean, it was crazy. So I love the way that this is a tight-knit family and community. And so I will never forget that. So you guys are, again, near and dear to my heart. So it's always my pleasure to give back when I can.
Yeah, it really this organization. I've been involved with NAR from about 1987, 88. When I started with their offices in Chicago, have worked with 3 different local associations, and our industry really is a family in a lot of ways. And so it is a very tight-knit group. We're all relationship-based people. And so that makes a difference in terms of supporting each other, and just we just want to say thanks for viewing us in that way, Dawn. We really do appreciate everybody, and we really do view this organization as part of our family. So again, thanks for being here, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Oh, sure thing. So for those of you who don't know me, I was looking at the list, and I do know a great handful of you today, and there's some people I don't know. My name is Dawn Coffey. Yes, I come from the company called Your Environmental Services. Radon is my specialty. That is a topic that I love. It all started about 18 years ago when I was new to the home inspection industry and was selling my own home, and a home inspector came in and had set a radon machine, and I didn't know what that was at the time. So that was almost 20 years ago, and so radon was kind of newer then. And my basement did have high radon. It tested at 16, which we'll talk about what those numbers are in a little bit. And that was really high. And my home office was down in the basement. The baby's playroom was in the basement. My treadmill was in the basement. I spent a lot of time in my basement. So I wanted to learn what that was, and kind of made it my mission then, and started radon testing. And I've personally tested thousands of houses over the past years. And now our company today tests about 2,000 houses a year in Northern Indiana and in Southwestern Lower Michigan. So I have a lot of really cool stats for you today on radon, and hopefully you'll learn some things that you didn't know about radon. And so I wanted to let you know some of the things that we'll be talking about today. We're going to talk about the health effects, why we should care about it, the radon here in our area and what those statistics are, radon laws and real estate, some of the different testing devices, because that does matter, the kind of device you're using, protocol for testing, the weather, if that affects tests and when it does, negotiating in the transaction a little bit, some things that we've learned and tips for you guys. Mitigation, the different types of mitigation, what to do, what not to do, how to know about the existing systems and if they work or they don't, and some real life radon-induced lung cancer patient survivors that I have personally met. So that's what we're going to cover today, and I promise that it won't be boring. We'll make it fun, and we want you to ask questions. So I want this to be interactive. And as Carlin said in the beginning, if you kind of raise your hand, we're so happy to take the questions throughout the presentation. So let me start by sharing my screen and the slides. Share. Carlin. Okay. Screen 2. All right. Can you guys see my screen? The slides? Yes. Perfect. Okay. So it is National Radon Awareness Month, and that is why we are here today. It's a wonderful time for us to teach you guys all about it, remind you about it. So what is radon? For those of you who may not know, it is a naturally occurring radioactive gas. So it's a dangerous gas that we all breathe outside and inside. They're breathing it right now, wherever you are. It does enter the home, we know, through the cracks, foundations, inside of the house, and come in through the sump pit and things like that. And it's dangerous, actually a Class A human carcinogen. And there are 21,000 people that die from it every single year from radon-induced lung cancer. And it's crazy because that statistic, 21,000 deaths, is actually 1 every 25 minutes. It's more than people that die in drownings every year, house fires, and accidents from texting while driving, believe it or not. So that really is a big number. And why we care about it is radon gas, breathing high levels of it is the same as smoking. And I think people sometimes forget about that because it is something that we can't see and we can't smell it. And so we don't think about it a lot. Something I like to put in the presentations is to relate to you exactly what those radon tests, mean when you get the reports. Each point of radon, we'll talk about these points, is the same as smoking 2.5 cigarettes a day. And where does this stuff come from? So radon is bad. We said it was radioactive. It actually comes from uranium rock underneath the ground that is decayed over several years, many, many years. And it goes from that solid state of being a rock and decays along this chain here all the way into radon gas. And it actually keeps going even after it's radon gas, all the way into lead. And we know that lead is dangerous. We know that lead's dangerous. So this is just something that starts off as uranium. We know they make bombs out of it, nuclear bombs. So it's just not good all around. But that's where it comes from, uranium rock underneath the ground that eventually decays into a gaseous state and then comes in through the cracks and such in our home. So these are some of the areas in which we know that it can come in. And I do want to mention, a lot of times I will talk to either a buyer or realtor who says, my client also wants to test the water because they've read on the EPA's website that it can be in the water. While that is true, it can be in the well water. It's not a thing here in Indiana. There's never been one case of radon in water that was high and to cause mitigation. In Indiana, we have a radon in air problem only. I do have some people who decide to test anyway during the transaction, and every single time it always comes out good. And I'll share those numbers with you in a minute when we talk about numbers. So just kind of keep in the back of your head a little mental note that if a client mentions radon water testing, we can certainly do it. We don't like to do it because we always know it'll be good. And it's an expensive test. It's $140 just to test the water for that. And so we really discourage it, trying to tell them that we know this area, all of Indiana, it won't come out bad. We promise it's a mitigation in air. We need to mitigate the air here and not worry about the water there. So this is kind of how it happens. Radon, the gas, actually decays into alpha particles that we then breathe in our lungs. And those particles, the radioactive particles, actually attach to the inside of your lungs. And that's what starts this change in those cells that cause cancer. Can actually go into your bloodstream too. And they're doing lots of studies where they're there are studies that have kind of brought up the proposal that could leukemia be one of the things that comes from radon. They're studying that in other types of cancers because we do inhale it in our lungs and then it goes to our other systems through our blood. So there have been times that we've seen people struggling with radon-induced lung cancer when they found out they had it, it wasn't actually lung cancer at first. I know a lady who had breast cancer who found out it actually was lung cancer before it was breast cancer, and she didn't know, kind of thing. And there have been several cases like that. So this is how it gets into our body. So we talked about points. The radon the gas is measured in picoCuries per liter. And that's a fancy little symbol up there in the red. And what we're looking at is how much radon gas the alpha particles are in 1 liter of air. And so you'll always see that symbol on a radon report. It'll be like, 1 point, and then it's picoCuries per liter. So that's the symbol that you'll see. All right, so what does that mean to you guys on those reports, right? Outdoors, we breathe about 0.5 point on average, and that's average throughout the United States. It is definitely different in different areas. The worst cases we've seen have been in a place like Ocala, Florida, where outside the levels have been 40, which would be safer to be inside your home than it would be breathing the levels outside. So we do have areas like that. Kind of the same if you can imagine caves or mines would have, high radioactivity. There are definitely places in the United States that outside is more dangerous than inside. But the average for the United States is 0.4. And around here, it is really a lot like that. So that's the good news, right? Inside, average indoor levels are 1.3 for the United States. That's where they like our radon levels to be at. So when you talk to mitigators, they want to get it down as low as possible, but they're usually shooting for something under 2, okay? So the EPA had to come up with an action limit. So they named it 4.0, 4 picoCuries per liter. And this is, my next slide will show you why they did that. Now, to confuse you, the EPA has on their website, and your buyer, a health conscious buyer, might bring this up. They're like, wait, I read that you're supposed to fix something over 2. The EPA actually has listed on the website and all the radon information and publications they have, it says consider fixing anything over 2. And that's because no level of radon is safe. Kind of the same as lead. No lead would be safe. Same thing with radon. The more that there is, the worse it is for you. So they do put that in there, but in a real estate transaction, we're paying attention to that 4.0 number because that's the action limit. And that is the number that you'll use in your transactions for negotiating systems. Okay. And what that means when it comes to comparing it to our cigarette smoking example is that inside levels at 1.3 is about smoking the same as smoking 3 cigarettes a day, and outside it's only 1. But that action limit, why they picked 4.0, was about 8 to 10 cigarettes a day, and over time that can give you lung cancer. So that is why they came up with that number, okay? So here's another example for you to show you how many x-rays a year. At that 4.0 mark, I said was smoking about 8 to 10 cigarettes a day. That's the same as having 200 x-rays a year. That's a lot of x-rays. So this chart kind of gives you that example there. And so when they said to consider fixing anything over 2.0, that's still like the same as 100 x-rays a year, radiation wise. All right. So if you've never smoked, those numbers that we talked about, 21,000 people dying every year, if you can look at this chart, it will show you that out of 1,000 people, 7 could get lung cancer at that 4.0 mark. And you know, as the higher the level, obviously it goes up. Now, the bad news is that if you were a smoker, the risk is 20 times. And so it goes up quite a bit if you're also a smoker. So sometimes people will say, I don't need to worry about that, I already smoke. You're really, really, really putting yourself in a really high health risk there, much quicker if you are a smoker and you're breathing high radon. And honestly, you have to think about even the people who have stopped smoking, they still have damaged their lungs, and moving forward, their risk is still going to be high because their lungs are already damaged. And we need to take into consideration that we don't know what we've been breathing since we were little. So unless you had the great fortune of testing your childhood home, which actually I know a few people who have done that and have been able to do that, you don't know what you've already been exposed to. So sometimes when in a real estate transaction, someone says, oh, I'm only going to be here for 2 years, I don't need to worry about that. Well, they don't know what they've been breathing since, again, they were young. So it's always really good to test. So this is what the United States looks like radon wise. And we do live in a high zone. And a lot of this is just because of back in the Ice Age when the glaciers came down and deposited on the Great Lakes and left us that great rocky stuff underneath our ground. So in Indiana, we are in a high zone. This here is some statistics for our county, our surrounding counties, that is kind of alarming, really. The national average is 7%, which is 1 in 15 homes. Here, we're talking about in Indiana, almost like 1 in 3 homes, is really what we see in Indiana. So these are your surrounding counties. And I know a lot of you probably sell in Elkhart as well, or across the state line into Michigan. And so that is the percentage of homes that are testing high over 4.0. And we know these statistics because every licensed tester has to turn in all of their data at the end of the year to the State Department of Health. And so we have to keep a log of every test that we've done and what that result was, which floor we tested in the house. We have to turn in the device that we used and its calibration information. They do a good job in making sure that that we've done our job, and then they keep the data and are able to share with us these statistics. So that's where those statistics come from. They're not my statistics. These are state statistics. So yeah. And that's really crazy for Kosciuszko County, that like half the houses. So you can see it's very different from area to area. And I know, Myron, you're probably thinking about, wait, what about where my family's at? West of here, the levels do go a little lower as we go west. So yours are lower. I don't have them, but I do know that they're a lot lower than what you see here on this screen. Okay. So a while back, I had taken 3 years of test data, or 10 years of test data, 10 years of test data, and mapped it on a map. And I haven't done that for the past 2 years, I think, but because it would look like a big red blob is what it would look like. But this is true data just from my own companies here, and that just gives you an idea of what it looks like in St. Joe County, that there's some pockets of it and other places they're not. So that's just a fun map to check it out. It's pretty much everywhere for sure. The highest levels we've seen has been on the northwest side, neighborhoods like Westwood Hills is where we saw that 110. And that's in the basement. We'll talk about the different levels coming up, but yeah, 110 over there. And there's neighborhoods like Westwood Hills, Fox Run, Nature's Gate, off into New Carlisle, off of 20, those couple neighborhoods before you get to New Carlisle. Those have all tested in the, 10s, 20s, and 40s on a regular basis. And then up and across the line into Michigan, Edwardsburg, we've seen a house at 100. I had a house this year down in this area again that was over 100, and it happens. And so, but here in St. Joe County, the northwest side has a high pocket. The south side around Kern Road has a high pocket where we see 10s all the time. Yeah, so there can be high pockets, but it doesn't mean that it will test high. I mean, believe it or not, it's all about the way that the gas travels under the ground and where it decides to pop up. And it could just be your foundation, right at your foundation, where the source of that gas could have been 3 miles away, but it ended at your house, and then your neighbor's testing just fine. That is why you can't assume, oh, my neighbor doesn't have it, then I won't have it. That's not true. But there can be, everybody in a neighborhood has it, The only way to know your radon level is to test. Does anybody have any questions so far? I'm doing all the talking. No? Yeah.
Dawn, there are 2 questions in the chat.
Okay.
One is from Pam Proctor. Let me go back in there.
Hi, Pam.
She said, Arbor Point, my highest ever was 23 in that neighborhood.
Oh, yeah. Cross Creek, Arbor Point, Field Point up there, and that northwest side has a really high pocket there. Yeah, we see really high tests on a regular basis there.
And then Julie Vest said, shouldn't all new construction homes have radon systems automatically installed based on these statistics? This is scary.
Yes, so yes, you're right. They should. And I have been working on advocacy down at the state for things like that. We're working on it. A lot of builders do offer it. It would be really great if people mentioned it when they went to go build a house, that they cared about it, because they can certainly install those systems for less than what a mitigation system costs today. So it would be less, depending on the footprint of the house, of course, but on average, it would be less because you're doing the work ahead of time. During the construction, it's just a little extra pipe, it's much harder to go into an existing home and then put that system in. So yes, we are certainly trying down at the state to get that passed. There are plenty of states that do already have that as a law for new construction. So it is something I think that we'll see in the future for sure. Yeah, good comment. Anybody else?
Nope, those are the only 2 so far.
Okay. All right. Go back to my.
I had a question.
Oh, sure.
Do you find this in slab houses or crawl houses, or mostly homes with basement?
Yep. Oh, is this Penny?
Yeah.
Hi. Hi, Penny. Yes, I'm talking about that next. So I'm going to click on over to that slide. That was perfect timing. Yes. Let's talk about that. New house, old house, basement, no basement. Let's start with the new and old. That's funny. I think Carlin was asking me during our pre-warm-up about that. And yes, so newer houses are actually really tight and energy efficient. Everything's really tight. And sometimes you can see higher levels in new houses over old houses are drafty. And that doesn't mean that that's a thing. I believe you should definitely test all homes no matter what, but we have seen draftier houses test, lower in some cases. just because there was more air flowing through there. Where in the new house, obviously everything's shut up and tight and traps the radon gas in higher levels. So you want to test both new and old. Basement, no basement. So if the science, just so you know, the science of it when it comes to the basement is this. If the basement's testing at 10, the upper level, that next level up is going to be half. Radon dissipates by half every level you go up. So the upstairs would be 5. Okay, so there's an example that if the home was on a crawl, it would test at 5. Okay, and if the home would have had a basement, it would have been 10. We do see the same statistics. So when I showed you the slide that showed you your local statistics in St. Joe County being 27%, we're talking 27% of all homes are testing high. It does not matter whether it has a basement or not, because it's the radon gas underneath the ground just coming through that foundation, whether it had a basement or not. It has nothing to do with that. It's just if there was a basement, it would have been twice as much. So Penny, I can give you a real life example that in your area on the south side, plenty of homes testing, let's say in the Twickenham Hills area on slabs that test in the 5s. I've seen the 5s and 7s down there personally. So yeah, definitely you want to test all homes. And the Surgeon General also suggests that all homes be tested. So I was sharing the example with Carlin and Myron earlier that I had a home inspector just last week ask me that same question. He said, I had a client who's buying on a crawl space and he mentioned to do the radon test. And I was wondering if that's even an issue. And I said, definitely an issue. He wants to test, and his did come out high at 11. So on the crawl, and we see it all the time. Our daughter's house, we just tested 2 weeks ago in Fort Wayne, and they're on a slab and they had never tested, and they had 8 in one section of the house and 12 on a slab where their family room drops down a step. So there were 2 different footprints there, and we just were curious about the difference between them. And one tested at 12 and one tested at 8, and that's on a slab. So it's definitely an issue for both crawl spaces and slab houses. It's not just basements. So again, 27% of all homes in the county testing over 4.0. So yeah, we believe that. Please don't have it in your head that, oh, there's no basement, we don't need to worry about that. Yeah, radon has nothing to do with a basement. So, yep. All right. So someone mentioned the laws about new construction and things like that. This is just an example of some of the radon laws that are out there for testing in schools or daycares. And then new construction, there are many states listed there, and more states are working on them now. And then over here on the left, this is just a nice example for you that there are some rules about disclosure and awareness, and I'm certain you know yours. Just it says disclosure only. Sellers must inform buyers about any radon tests on the home specifically. So it's not, it's not required here, but it's definitely, we see more and more testing over the past 20 years in my career for sure. I remember back when we started, there was probably, of all the home inspection orders we would get, there's only about 30% were testing for radon. Where now in a home inspection, it's more like 80–90% of people are choosing to do a radon test. And radon tests are really, they're only good for that moment in time. And we'll talk about it when we talk about the weather coming up here. It's something that should be tested every 2 years, according to the Surgeon General, because things do change underneath the ground. So I don't want you to think that the radon test is just, it's a one-time thing, and it's what it was supposed to be. The last test said 2.0. It was supposed to be 2.0. Why is it higher now? So that definitely can happen. The requirements that we do have to abide by is HUD has the requirement for multifamily units. So we actually test quite a bit of, apartments and senior living centers and places like that. Student housing around the Notre Dame area, we do a lot of testing over there, and throughout our area. So with HUD, if you happen to sell to somebody who's doing a multifamily property in a sale or refinance, you're probably looking at required radon testing. And there are rules about how many units need tested. It isn't just one test, it's quite a few. So they have rules about how many on each floor that comes in contact with the ground, in which it depends on how many different footprints that they have. Is some of it on a basement or a slab, and the different heating systems throughout a property. So we have to actually see the blueprints or physically go to the property to be able to know how many tests need to be set at a property. I mean, we've done so many of those, and they're just all different. So just know that if you ever sell something multifamily, that you're going to have to test. You're going to have to test that for sure. Okay, I'm going to move on to the different kinds of testing devices if nobody has any questions. Okay. So everyone does always ask me, it's one of the biggest questions of all, are those charcoal things from the hardware store accurate? Yes, they are. I will tell you that they are. The reason we don't use them is because we don't know what happens to them when they leave us. So they can be accurate if you want to do it at home yourself. You need to truly follow the instructions. And our only concern is really what happens to those during shipping, honestly. And that's because it's charcoal, and they actually, those little charcoal packets or canisters, the charcoal actually traps those particles, and humidity does affect it. And so that's where my concern is as a radon professional, is that because humidity does affect it, I don't know what happens during shipping, more so in the summertime. So a professional isn't going to use that because for that reason, and the fact that it just gives me one number. So, but if I was, a regular homeowner and I was curious about it, that's a nice starting point that would be really cost effective if I followed the directions and maybe tested in the winter time, knowing that humidity shouldn't play a big factor in, maybe skewing results. Okay. So that is definitely an option. The two middle devices are things that might be used in larger quantity testing, such as an apartment complex or student housing or the senior living centers. We're not going to be able to put, 100 machines in the place at once. So we're going to order these long-term devices that can sit there for 90 days, and those will then be sent to a lab. The nicknames on those are Alpha Tracks and EPERMs. So we could send the Alpha Track out, and do 200 if we wanted at the same time. They're not electronic. Those are passive devices that the lab reads. So we won't see those in a real estate transaction at all. What you're really going to see in the real estate transaction is the last option there, the continuous radon monitor, which is awesome. It does so much. It's going to tell us every single hour a reading of what that radon level is. Okay, so when the report prints out, it's going to show us a graph of all those readings and a level for every hour. It's going to tell us the weather, the environmental information. So it's going to tell us all about the temperature, the humidity, the air pressure. It can tell us if any of those things changed as well. So we can tell if someone's tampered with the test, if they've opened up windows. We're able to see all that data on that report. We can see if weather affected that test. Okay. And so that is why we want to use continuous radon monitors for professional testing in your real estate transaction, because it just gives us all the information we need to give you an accurate recommendation. There are some companies who use the device to the left of that, which we nickname ePerms. And I personally don't like that device because it just gives you a number. So imagine this. It's a device that you sit out at a house and you have to take an electronic reading of the device before you set it. And you take another electronic reading of the device. It's an electrical charge, so it's a volt thing. So you're measuring how many volts it was when you started, how many volts it is when you end. And then they have to do a mathematical equation, and it turns into a number that they just type on the report. So they're hand typing this number on the report. There's nothing electronic about it. There's nothing automated about it. That number, they could data entry an error there. When you use a continuous radon monitor, the machine is producing that report and that number and that calculation. And because it's, you know, a computer like that, it's always going to be correct and accurate there. I just have a problem with companies that I feel like it's just a little less professional to use, you know, this other device, because it's, and why they do it is just less expensive for them. It's honestly a cheap way for them to do a test, and they hand type these reports with these numbers in it, and they hand calculate them. And the other thing about that device is that it's an electrical charge. It can be totally messed up sitting in a truck all day. So in the heat or in the cold, it's going to change that electrical charge. And I don't know that any of that's accurate. So I don't like them. I think that if we're going to be professional licensed testers and we need to give our, you know, our clients the best information possible, it's going to be companies that use continuous monitors, because it's the state of the art best thing that we can give you. So that's just my opinion on that. Anybody have any questions about devices? No questions. All right. Okay. Then there's the protocol. That's always a fun thing to talk about. Yeah.
So this is just me asking, but so my husband and I just built a new home. We got a test from Amazon. It's just, I think it's probably one of the little charcoal ones. Mm-hmm. Now you're saying that's still pretty accurate, even if we sent it in like through the mail. They send you like a little envelope to send it back in, but.
Yeah, I would do it in the winter. I'm always so afraid about those sitting in the hot UPS truck or whatever, going back, or the mail truck, you know, for hours and hours when it's, you know, 100 something degrees, and the humidity levels can skew that. And so if I were to do that, I would definitely want to do it in the winter time.
Okay. So we'll probably retest it maybe here in a couple months, because I think it was like 1.9, which they said was at the like threshold where you don't have to retest again for a while. But
yeah, I have a lot of people who will do those first, and then if they get a high result, then they're calling for a professional test to confirm that result before they would go to mitigate. We see that a lot. So they'll be like, I did a charcoal test and it came out high and I'm a little nervous. I want to make sure I did it right. So you're going to confirm for me that this is truly high before we go spending the money on mitigation.
And then it looks like Pam just put a question in, Pam Proctor. What impact does weather have on the test results, rain, snow, heat, etc.? Yeah.
Okay. So we have that. We can talk about that now if you want. So yes, it can, but it doesn't mean that it will. Okay. So it's kind of a trick answer, right? My best example of that is a true story in South Bend, off of Ironwood, north of Castle Point Apartments, in the Cloverleaf Villas. Okay. So we had 2 radon tests to do in there, and we did them at the same time in 2 villas that had the same footprint right across the street from each other. We set them on a Friday. A storm came in on the weekend. Okay. We picked these back up on Monday. One of the villas tested normal, like in the 2.0 range, and had no storm spike on that report. The other one totally had a 9.0 storm spike on that report. And so it's interesting that two homes that were built exactly the same in the same location, one could be affected by the weather and one not. And why is that? It totally depends on the cracks in that foundation, you know, where it's leaking at, the vacuum systems of that home, the way the people might have come and go kind of thing. So weather can, and what's great about these electronic monitors I told you about is if you're using that, you can see that, right? So we saw that one villa tested good at 2.0 and the other, you know, was high. It averaged over 4.0 because of that storm, where if the guy that used that other device, he would have just given you a number and you wouldn't have known necessarily what, you know, did the weather affect that? You'll never know. They don't have hourly readings on there. It's just one number. And so what we like to say about the weather is this: if there is severe weather, which has to be defined by the National Weather Service, okay? So the National Weather Service, let's say for wind, will tell you that the wind advisory is set at 30 miles an hour or more. If we have like, you know, 3 inches of rain in a short amount of time, something like that. If we know that there's super severe weather like that, and we look at the report and nothing has changed on that report, we're going to submit it the way that it is. It's fine. Weather didn't affect any of that. We still kept the machine there. We'll always keep the machine there, just so you know. All right. We can be challenged on the reading if it's accurate or not, if there is some sort of storm situation that we see on the graph actually affected it. And sometimes we choose to just leave the monitor there a couple extra days. Sometimes people will choose to retest. If it's regular snow in Michiana, which you haven't had a lot of that this year, right? Which is kind of cool. You know, we say that that's a normal winter. You know, snow happens. 1-2 inches of snow isn't something you're going to invalidate a radon test for, because that's pretty normal living conditions, you know, normal weather conditions for Indiana and where you guys are. But if there was like, you know, 2 feet of snow in one day or something, and it caused some sort of change on that report that you could see that, you might say, well, you know, this affected this. And so again, the options are that you can certainly keep the monitor there longer, you know, or retest. And some people choose to do that. So we do like to say, though, under regular rain, regular snow that's, you know, not severe, we like to say that's pretty normal. And just because something's high doesn't mean that there was a spike there. We're actually looking for a spike. And when I say spike, I do mean a jump up in the level when the storm actually was coming through, that it popped up, and then when the storm left, it came back down. Okay, so something like that could skew an average number. We certainly understand that. So we'll work with you. Most testers will work with you on something like that. Okay, and we do. But on your everyday, like I said, rain and snow, that just happens, and that's normal. So if your test is high, you just need to mitigate. So does that help? Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm going to share my screen again. Back to my slides. All right. So testing protocol. We are challenged a lot on this. The first one, lowest livable area. This is not. There's actually 2 protocols, and maybe that's something you don't know. The EPA actually has 2 protocols, one for real estate and one for non-real estate. And this is the only line that is different between them, right? In a non-real estate transaction for your own home, it's the lowest lived in area that they want you to test. So if you never went down in the basement, you don't have to test that according to the EPA. But in a real estate transaction, that's what I have up on the screen, because that's what you guys do all day. It's the lowest livable area. So you have no idea how many times we will walk into a house and the seller will say, what are you going down there for? We never go down there. Yeah, that's nice, but we have to test the lowest livable area. And livable is also another term that we are challenged on a lot. sometimes, well, the rules are this: if I can stand up in it and I can put a workbench down there or a rug with some kids' toys type thing, it can be a livable area. It might not be pretty and it might not be big, okay? But if somebody has storage containers down there, then it's considered livable. What would not be livable is something that I'm gonna hit my head, so, you know, less than 7 feet, let's say. If there are only mechanicals there, in a small room, that it's only mechanicals and there's no way to move things or put things around that. So no room for like a workbench or storage containers. We're not going to test that. We're not going to test a Michigan basement. But there really have been times where we've gotten yelled at quite a bit, where people are like, I don't go down there. And that's not, I don't think that's livable. There are some that are really close. And so this is what we would tell you. You know, we're not trying to cause any trouble, but this is what we would say. If we consider it livable, that I really can put something down there and use that space, and I'm going up and down, then we're going to test it. And we're going to tell you that, hey, this, whatever the test says, that's going to be your worst case scenario. So if that happens to be 10, let's say 10.0, then we know on the main level, they're breathing 5, right? And it needs mitigated. But, you know, if that test comes out okay, then there's no worries there. But I mean, it's definitely something that we in the protocol have to test if it's considered livable. And I know that that definition is just really, you know, different for different people, but that's our job. And what else isn't livable, I think, had one recently where the basement, you had to lift the floor up, like in the kitchen, a hatch to go down into the basement. And so that was odd, you know, kind of thing. That's not really a normal way today to get down to your basement, for sure. Yeah. So anyway, as long as we can stand up in it and things can go down there, it's considered livable, whether you would live down there or not. So there are other rules that we have to follow, and I've listed them here. So we try really hard to follow all of these. Sometimes in a basement that's still livable, the way that they've set up the mechanicals or whatever are not all together. Maybe they're all spread out or something, and we do the very best we can to follow every one of the protocols necessary. But we definitely don't want to put them by exterior doors or windows. Okay, we definitely want to stay away from that. And so I'll tell you a funny story about that. There was a time that went and set a test in a basement, and we use stands now, so we're going to always put it on our stand, so we know it's to protocol up off the floor, the right height and this and that, and it's not on people's, let's say, shelf or their piece of furniture type thing. But this example was before that, and, you know, learn a lesson there. So we put it on a shelf in the basement away from, it says 1 foot from exterior walls. And this was a deep shelf, and put it definitely 1 foot away. And the level was insane. It was like 60 for a neighborhood that's usually in the 5s and 7s. And the seller didn't, we turned in the result thinking nothing of it, but the seller was challenging that and did some research and said, why'd you put it up against my window? And I remember I personally had set that test, and I was like, I did not put this against your window. And she's like, yeah, you did. And I said, there wasn't a window down there. She had covered the window and decorated it, so she didn't have to look at the window in the basement, the egress window. Had no idea. It looked like a built-in bookshelf to me, the way that it was described. But it was literally set 1 foot away from this exterior window, which would be breaking the protocol here. It needs to be at least 3 feet. And so the level had, you know, it matters, okay, the way that the radon comes in. So we went and retested after realizing that she had a window we didn't know was a window. and put it on the more interior walls of the basement. And the new test, in fact, we set 2 or 3 machines around that basement just because we were so curious, and everything else came out at 9. So while she still had a radon problem, it just wasn't 60, you know, and 60 sounds tragic, even though it's all fixable the same. It just looked really bad. So setting it up against, following this protocol really does matter for those reasons. Okay, so we try really hard to follow that. Oops. There we go. All right, next slide. So we do want you to do your part in following the protocol. So we do leave a sheet at the house that tells the occupants kind of what not to do during a radon test. And so I want to talk about that. You know, most people have the furnace anyway. Running your furnace, obviously your air conditioning in the summer would be normal conditions. What we can't have is things that are going to bring in air from the outside. So no whole house fan or the window air conditioners, no fireplace, wood stoves, that kind of thing that's going to draw that, because it will change the stack effect in the house, the vacuum systems of the house, and change how much soil gas is sucking in. And it actually could cause it to go a lot higher. So that is why. And ceiling fans can be okay in other rooms, just not where the test device is. And what we like to tell people is, and some people, in fact, last week I had a lady say, when are you going to come get this machine? Because I need to do my laundry. And I thought, I kind of chuckled, and you can definitely do your laundry. You can go down there. She was so afraid of going down in her basement. Please don't assume that your sellers know that it's okay to live normally. You can open the basement door, you can go down in the basement. You want to use your house under normal living conditions for sure, but what we have to follow is something called closed house conditions, okay? And so what that means, and I love to say it this way to sellers when we're at the house, is I just can't have you enjoy the breeze, okay? So you can let the pets inside and outside as you have to. You can let the kids in and out. I just can't have you open the slider door and enjoying the breeze, you know? So none of that, no windows to enjoy the breeze like that. You know, we definitely are going to avoid moving day. So that is something that radon professionals need to avoid. So if someone tells us when we arrive at the house, oh, we're moving tomorrow. Okay, darn, nobody told us that. Luckily, if you use a continuous radon monitor, like the ones that we use, they are so advanced that we are able to set start delays. So we don't have to like cancel that appointment. We often will set a start delay. We can set it for anything. So I can tell it 12 hours later, start 24 hours later, 48 hours later, that kind of thing. So they can still do their thing and I don't have to make an extra trip back. We'll still set that machine and explain to them it's on a start delay. So we can definitely work around the moving. I think we're more scared of losing the machine in the move. So our company does actually lock those down, just so you know. And it's for so many reasons. One, so no one cheats, and 2, so we don't lose the machine. So if you ever see that at a house, our little machines are locked down. So yeah, so that was the radon protocol. It does have to be set in certain spaces, and then we need the sellers to try to comply as best as possible with normal living conditions, but closed house conditions. And then that gives us the most accurate picture that we can. I'm going to come back to me for a minute so we can talk about that. Okay, so we talked about the weather, and what I want to say about these tests is I mentioned to you, your test result can say one thing now and say something a while down the road, you know, years later or whatever. So in the winter time, when our houses are shut up, we are going to see your house or some houses test higher, okay, because it is shut up. So statistically, people who choose to test in the winter often see higher levels that if that same house was tested, let's say in the spring or the summer, it might be lower, okay? And in the real estate transaction, we're using just really a 48-hour test. And that is because that is what the EPA told us that the minimum test period could be. And they designed that really specifically for your real estate transaction. Because honestly, the very best test you can do is a year-long test. It's called a long-term test. And if you set one of those little canisters that we talked about when I showed you the different testing devices, they have long-term alpha tracks, you know, that you can use. And you just set it in your house all year long. And it's nothing that you have to do closed house conditions on. You just live normally for an entire year and see what that says. That is your very best test for your home and the way that you live. But because that doesn't obviously work in a real estate transaction, we only have that short window of time in your negotiating period to give you some sort of picture. Guys, it's not the Bible, okay? It's a picture in time, a little window of what it was at that moment, okay? And like we talked about, sometimes there are weather issues or you know, it might be the way that the people who live there come and go. The things can change underneath the ground all the time. That soil gas is moving, you know, it's a live thing that's moving, and it may be there one time and not another. We've had people who, like I said, tested good at one time, and then they went and sold 2 years later or 3 years later, and then they had an issue and they said, wait, I tested this. Well, things change. You know, it was just a picture in time. So we can never guarantee those, okay? We can guarantee that that's what it was at that moment, okay? That's why we want to test every 2 years. And yeah, that's really important. So I just wanted to kind of point that out to you. Go back to the screen again. Do we have a question? No? Okay. So on the different sides of the transactions, you've got like the buyer saying, hey, I want to know that I'm breathing good radon levels all the time. You know, so if there's some, you know, some things on there where the weather made it go a little higher, not necessarily a crazy spike, but it was, you know, it snowed an inch or two and it did go a little higher during that time. We don't consider that severe, and they're going to want it fixed. All right. And the seller is sitting there saying, I don't want to pay to fix this. The snow caused a high level. Like we said, regular weather for your area is that it snows and rains in Michiana. Okay. So if it snowed in Arizona, that might be a different story. All right. But around here, just because it goes a little bit higher, you're still going to want to negotiate to fix that. But we definitely see some sellers that want to retest and get a lower result. And we usually take the average of the 2 tests if we are challenged that way to see what that comes out to. But yeah, there's definitely, depends on who you're working for, which side of the transaction, and how they feel about it. Oh, and this is just to remind me to tell you guys how awesome you are, that you can make a big difference as a realtor in saving lives, because people do get lung cancer from this. And you can actually change that. You can actually stop someone from having to go to chemotherapy, guys. And you can stop someone from losing their life by recommending a test. So there's not that many ways that you can make that big of a difference in people's lives. You can give blood, or you can be a doctor, but you guys, realtors, can actually save lives by recommending tests for such as radon or even other environmental things like water. But I think that's really cool that you guys have that ability. So kudos to you. Okay. What are we doing on time? 10. Okay. Mitigation. So let's talk about fixing it. This is a diagram of the typical outside install for a radon system. If you haven't really noticed, maybe next time you drive through a neighborhood, you can kind of look for that. What they do is they drill a small hole in the slab there, about as big as the pipe, and they'll dig out the dirt a little bit, like a 5-gallon bucket's worth, to cause a void where the soil gas is going to be attracted to that void. And they'll hook up their pipe to a mitigation fan, and they have to route it just past the roof line to exit there. And it just goes back up into the atmosphere, and that's how it works. They don't actually suck radon gas out of the house. They suck it from underneath the slab, so it never enters the house, is how that works. That's the typical outside system in our area. So that's kind of what that looks like there. Yep. Now, we can install it sometimes if the mechanicals are set up right on the inside, where you don't have to see the pipe on the outside of the house. So this is an example over here on the right of a garage install. And the mechanicals must have been in the basement up against the garage wall for that to work, okay? And so then it goes, you know, up through the house and into the attic, and the fan is in the attic. So in that picture, the fan's there in the attic, and then it comes out the top there. So that can definitely be an option if the mechanicals in the home are set up correctly. So that can't be done in every home. But as a realtor, if I'm on the buying side, I'm gonna wanna write my inspections response to say something like mitigation system to be, design of mitigation system to be approved by buyer. Maybe that way they have a say in what that looks like. If you don't pay attention to it, they're gonna just throw it on the outside of the house. And so maybe the buyer kicks in an extra $100 or $200 to have it inside so they don't have to look at the pipe on the outside. And depending on your mitigator, there are, you know, good ones and bad ones out there. Some will just slap it wherever they want to on the outside. And then some actually care and will want to do a good job about it not being, you know, as ugly. So an attic install would look like this, where that's all you see then, which is really great. So pay attention to that when negotiating. So people often ask, how do they mitigate a crawl space or a slab? These are kind of showing you what that looks like. Yep, without a basement, they're just going to do it this way in the diagram here, and that shows you that they still tap into underneath the home's foundation there. And in the crawl space, there's much more work to do. So while they still have to do all that regular piping in the regular systems, they also have to put vapor barrier down throughout the whole crawl and seal it up on the walls here like that to cause the vacuum system of that suction to work. If there is a basement and a crawl, the crawl will also have to be mitigated every time. So it will cost more if there's a crawl and a basement. I actually had a house where they mitigated just the basement and it still tested high. And then after they mitigated the crawl, it worked because they were trying to take a shortcut thinking, oh, this should be enough. And it never is. So.
Hey, Helen. Shirley Ranierson asked, do you know if the Breathe Easy air purification systems help to reduce the radon levels in a basement, or are those primarily just moisture and odor reducing systems?
I'm so glad you asked that. And the answer that I have for you, I've actually talked to him, the guy who invented that. It's an air filter that you put on your furnace that he swears takes away the radon decay particles that you would be breathing in, those alpha particles, right? It traps them in that filter and zaps them electronically and destroys them or something. And so I had asked him, because he has his case study like posted on his website, because I thought that would be such a great thing. I would sell those all day long, right? But what he can't tell me is in that study is I want to see the data of, I want to see the data of the radon level before installing that filter, and then the data after that, right? And we measure the radon gas. But his case study, he didn't measure the gas. He actually measured the true alpha particles. And we don't have, as radon testers, the ability, there's no machine for us to test what he tested. And so I can't ethically sell that because I don't know that it works. So like he's saying, my study shows this works, but it doesn't, there's no study on the gas itself. And so, like I said, I want to be able to say, oh, my house was 6.0 and now it's 2.0, right? And so he's saying that it's still going to show high radon gas in the house, but that his filter will take those particles and zap them out. I'm just, it wasn't good enough for me. Does that make sense? I mean, I went over it and over it with him, and I do see him at all kinds of, you know, radon expos and that across the country. And it sounds really good, and I'm sure people are buying them, but I have no way to show you, right, in a real estate transaction or a client that actually works, because he's not measuring the gas. So since I have no way to test that myself, I can't say that I believe in it, unfortunately. I want to believe in it, but yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, she said thank you.
Oh, okay. All right, we'll go back to, okay, sump pits. So if something that also costs more, a little bit more, is if there is a sump pit, they do have to do some adjustments there. On the right-hand side, that is what a pedestal style sump pit looks like. If that's the kind that your seller has, it will have to be changed out to this kind, the submergible sump pump. So there could be another $150 or so added to the bill in a mitigation system for that, because they have to submerge it and seal it off, because that is an area in which a lot of radon gas comes in at, and everything has to be sealed up, all the cracks in that. Can just changing out the sump pump stop all of the radon from coming in? No. There used to be a company a while back in your area that would sell, pitch their mitigation system work by saying, oh, hey, we'll just do this for $400 and we'll mitigate the sump pump and retest. And if it's high, then it will cost you, you know, another $500 to mitigate it. But if it doesn't, then you're good. Knowing every time that wouldn't work. So I didn't like that. I'm glad that they're not around anymore. And so just changing that out isn't going to be a big enough difference, because the radon comes in other areas as well. That's not the only area that it's coming in from. So, and everything has to be sealed in order for those vacuum systems to work correctly. So, but I just wanted you to know that this system could cost a little bit more if there was this pedestal style that had to be changed out. All right. And some homes need more than one system, guys. So this is an example of a home that had a sump pit. They needed a second suction point there because they had a footing between the foundation there. And then they had over here like a crawl space area. So they needed a few different things happening there. So a home can go up if the home needs more than one thing. All right. So that's definitely a possibility. This is a picture to remind me to tell you a story that really happened. So after they go ahead and install the mitigation system, and you've done your job in negotiating that system, the seller's paying for that system, you have to test afterwards to know that that system is working. 1 in 10 systems does not work. 1 in 10. So if you've sold real estate this year and you had installed 10 mitigation systems because it was a high test over 4.0, I promise you one of those isn't going to work. That's the statistics on it. And it isn't the fault of the mitigator. All right. Every system around, our area is pretty much the same. I showed you the diagrams of what those look like. They do not know what they're going to get until they see a test afterwards. Okay. Now, by law, by protocol and EPA's rules for our licensing for a mitigator is that they have to provide a third-party post-mitigation test at least. Okay. So what that means for them is they're probably throwing a canister on the counter when they leave. Now, there can be some companies that offer you electronic testing as well, which is really, a great thing. Something's got to be done. Like, it needs to be tested. Okay, I can give you millions of examples of people who got caught later because they had no idea it wasn't working. This particular photo is not the photo of the incident, and I just really wish I had a photo of the incident, but it will remind me of the story. So my ex-husband was a home inspector, and he had called me from the attic of an inspection and said, hey, Dawn, I'm at this house, I'm in the attic, and someone installed a mitigation system here for these people, these sellers who've lived here 5 years now. And the pipe goes into the attic and the fan is still sitting in a box next to the pipe in the attic. The guy went to lunch and never came back to finish the job. And in 5 years, these people have been breathing the high levels they thought they had mitigated, you know, and they didn't know that it wasn't running because they didn't do a post-mitigation test. That's one example. Another example is a state police officer in Osceola selling his house. We come in and test. He's laughing at us when we set the machine. It's because it was me that day. I remember that happening. He's like, I have a mitigation system. I'm like, great. Then you shouldn't have any worries, right? So we tested it. It was 5.4. And when he was really upset about that, so they had the mitigator out, and the system was not working properly from the get-go. Again, he had never done a post-mitigation test. We don't know what happens to those canisters when the mitigator may leave them on the counter. They might get shoved in a drawer, they might get thrown away, they might go with the seller, might take it with them in the move. We have no idea. So we advocate for post-mitigation testing to know, after all the hard work of negotiating that and someone paying for it, you guys deserve to know that the system is working. That just needs to definitely be really something that always happens, okay? So the things that, why might it also be a failed test is that they might need a second suction point or a stronger fan even, you know? The mitigator doesn't really know until he sees what that test is. So please do the post-mitigation testing. And it'd be great if you did it before closing to get it all worked out. But at the very least, if someone leaves them a charcoal canister, please tell them to do that test for sure, okay? I'm going to pop over to a video real quick to also show you that these systems do come with a little like thermometer looking thing called a manometer. We also call it a J-tube. And so I want to show you this quick little video. It's like 2 minutes long and shows you how that works, because you're going to see this inside houses and I want you to know how they work and what they mean. So I'm going to pop over to my other screen. Sound.
Hi, I'm Kurt Drew. This is a training video to help you understand the YouTube gauge reading on a radon mitigation system. We have simulated a radon mitigation system here. We have a prowler fan, and we have a vent pipe and the suction pipe on the system. And we always have the YouTube gauge below the fan, typically inside the home. Okay, so here the fan is at 0 water columns. We're going to go ahead and turn the system on. And the prowler is going to have a pretty open flow here, and the water column reading is right around 1.2, okay? So the first thing I want to show you is restricting the discharge of the system. I have a damper in here. I'm going to close the damper of the system. Okay, so I closed the damper. What did it do to the water column reading? It reduced it almost down to 0. It's about a 0.3 water column reading by dampering the discharge. So in diagnosing a system, maybe it's 0 degrees outside and the system has a very low water column reading, you may have an ice jam. That's what an ice jam would do to a system, okay? It's restricting that discharge. So now I'm going to open it back up. Okay, and we're going to get back to our water column that we were at before. And now I'm going to restrict the suction part of the system. Watch what it does to the water column reading. See how it drove it up to 2? So now we're sucking maybe on harder soil, and that's driving your water column reading up. We're restricting the suction of the system. Now what's happened is your pressure inside the pipe has increased, which has driven up your water column reading, but your airflow has gone down. The performance of the system is actually a little bit less quality performance because you're moving less air or less CFM. So to recap on this, restricting the suction on it drives up your water column reading and drives down your airflow. And then when you restrict the discharge of the system, is going to drive your water column reading down, and it's also going to reduce your airflow of your system as well. So that's what's going on with these YouTube manometers, and that's how you read them and understand the airflow and performance of a radon mitigation system. So hopefully that helps.
Okay. All right. So anyway, with that, I wanted you to know that in the house, you're going to see those pipes. Usually they're installed, let's say, in the basement or out in the garage, and you'll see that manometer, which we call it a J tube, and it has a sticker on it. It should have a sticker on it. It's supposed to have a sticker on it with the company that installed it, and the install date and their phone number, and then that manometer is right there. That is not the radon level. And we get calls on that a lot where people say, oh, well, I checked that tube and my radon level looks good. That's not your radon level. So what the video just showed you, that is the suction level of the fan itself, okay? So that's gonna tell a mitigator whether that fan is working or not. But again, like he showed you, the fan can be running and it could not be working right. So that's why I say post-mitigation testing is really important, so you know that that system is working right, or they'll have to make an adjustment, okay? And so every home should have one of those on it, and you can check it every now and then. If it looks like a J and it's in that one range, it's working well. If it's up at 2, then it might have some restriction on the suction, but could still be working fine. But if it looks like a U, it is not working. U is bad. J is good. Okay.
Hey,
All right.
Dawn.
So, yeah.
Julie Vest is asking, what should the suction level be?
Yeah. So he was saying in the video that 1 is really where they'd like to see it. Okay. And 2 doesn't mean it's not working, but we don't want it to be at 0. Okay, we never want it to be lined up as a U. We don't want it to be at 0 at all. 0 means it's definitely not sucking anything. Okay, so 1 is ideal. 2 could just be, like he said, harder soil or something, but it's still working. So yeah, if you see it in a U, it's definitely not working. And so up on my slide, I'll go back to my slide. So sometimes this is what happens when it's lined up in a U shape. It could be any one of these things that's wrong. And so if, you know, if you find that it's in a U shape, then it could be, you know, it may not be that it needs a new fan. It could be some of this. And sometimes you might just need a new fan. Maybe the fan burned out. I mean, the fan is running 24/7. So those are only designed to last, you know, 5 to 7 years. So you'll see that's why a radon mitigator will only give you a warranty for, let's say, 5 years, is because they know that that's the life of the fan itself. You know, I mean, I'm not saying that they don't last longer. I've seen fans last, you know, 9 or 10 years, but it is something that's kind of running 24/7 for all that time. And they're not noisy, just so you know. I mean, they hum kind of quietly. They are energy efficient. They're not costing a lot of money to run at all. And, but they do poop out sometimes, and you might need a new one. But it could also be this. So if you find that the fan isn't working, you're gonna have to call somebody out, but you could check these things yourself at home, and maybe it's something simple. So I had said before that with that post-mitigation test, they might just need a second suction point. Sometimes they need 2 different ones, or a stronger fan. Those fans come in different sizes. And so it could be that they need that. And the reason, another reason why you'd want a post-mitigation test in your transaction is because they have to guarantee their work. So they have to come back and fix this, you know? So you want to get that taken care of as soon as possible. So the last part of my presentation is really about people that that or have been affected by radon-induced lung cancer. This was a realtor, so I'm sure that this can relate to you guys. He was somebody who never recommended testing. He thought it was stupid and that it wasn't real. And then he ended up with lung cancer and found out that the place he had lived in for 12 years was over 10.0. And he had surgery and he got a little bit better, but he did end up dying of lung cancer from that. And in the end, he was able to tell people that the people that he worked with and his, you know, colleagues in real estate that, hey, this is a real thing. So that was Denny Edwards of Ohio. And these are all people too that I have been able to meet and or studied over my career that have all died of radon-induced lung cancer. And one of the stories that really grabs my heart is this lady here was a seller, and the buyer came into the real estate transaction and tested her house, and it was high, so they had to fix it. And then the lady moved to her new house and didn't test. She thought that was dumb and was angry about having to pay for the system. She ended up being diagnosed shortly after moving with lung cancer to find out that it was probably from the house she had lived in for so long because it had tested high, and she was a never smoker. So, you know, it is real. And I do travel the country with different, you know, radon conferences and such, and do a lot of advocacy. So I do get to meet these people. These are some of the people that I've been able to work with over the past year. And Kim was diagnosed with lung cancer. She had lived in her house for 8 years and was really angry after getting lung cancer to find out that her realtor had never mentioned radon testing at all. And so remember I told you it can be a lifesaver. She so wishes that she had that option because it could have prevented her from getting this lung cancer, which she almost died. She had one lung removed, so she only has one. And very sad, this struggle. She's better now, and she now spends her spare time traveling the country, advocating for radon testing at home inspection conferences and at radon conferences, so people like us have all the information we need to just keep spreading the good news. Up in the corner, Rachel was on the women's Olympic team for hockey, 31 years old, diagnosed with radon-induced lung cancer, also from her home. Her childhood home tested high, and the 2 homes she had lived in both tested high, because she went back and researched the 3 homes she lived in. All 3 were high in her area. She lived in a high radon state. And so she's alive today, but she is struggling pretty bad with this lung cancer. It's gone to her brain, so that's not good. And she also travels the country trying to advocate for radon testing. And then the last lady down here is Gloria. Her husband died of radon-induced lung cancer, and she's dedicated her life and travels all over to states helping others get laws passed about it and such. And it's just really great. She's made her mission to try to get people to just test, you know? You don't know unless you test. And so that's where you guys come in. I think you're pretty wonderful. And so the things I want you to take away from today, this is my review, that breathing radon gas is the same as smoking. And smoking does not have a very good stigma today. So why should radon, right? Every home needs tested every 2 years. The test, even if there's a mitigation system there, so even existing mitigation systems, I didn't even say that. We were talking about post-mitigation. If you have a home and it has a mitigation system, still order a test. We need to know that that system is working for the new people that are going to live there. Just because the fan's running, we have no idea if it's really working or not, you know? We want to know what those levels are. We don't know if they had done a post-mitigation test, even to know if it was working from the get-go. I actually had a couple come into the lab that lives in Granger, and they had lived there for 12 or 13 years, and they were testing their water, but they said, oh, hey, I see you test for radon. We should do that. We have one of those pipes in our house. And we went out there, and they tested at 8.0. We have no idea if it ever worked or if it just quit at some point, but they lived there for almost 13 years breathing 8.0, you know? So you got to test to know it's working, all right? Use a company that only tests with continuous radon monitors. We talked about why, because those other devices only give you one number. And radon in water is not a thing here in our area. And of course, fix it if the levels are high and retest to confirm that they're lowered. So those are the things that I'd really like you to be able to take back with you. Okay, do we have any questions before we wrap up today?
We did. So Julie Vest is asking, what is the average cost of testing with continuous radon monitors?
Okay. Anywhere between 115 and maybe 130, depending on the company. Yeah.
And then I don't see any additional questions yet.
Penny's
Everybody is
raising
really
her hand. Penny
Okay.
is raising her hand. Oh, she's muted.
Myself. Okay.
there. You go.
I have a question. A smoker often has a cough. And I'm wondering if all these people who died of it, breathing this, did they have something like a cough that they all had, that, or is there something that indicates you might have a problem?
The two things that I've heard from the people that I personally have talked to is that they had a dry cough or they had a pain in their back.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and then we talked about, there was a woman that I met that had breast cancer. And then when she went to the doctor and they went through all of that testing, they said, yes, you have breast cancer, but this actually originated in your lungs first. You had lung cancer and didn't know it.
Oh,
And
wow.
so yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? It sounds crazy, but we know so many women with breast cancer and then they think, oh, it's spread to everywhere else. And I think sometimes they are able to figure that out and sometimes they can't, but it makes you wonder, you know, so yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maria Lasinko did say that she hears this all the time. I've lived here for so many years. I'm fine and fight about installing a system.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked about what that risk is. It depends on how much time you are going to spend in the house and such. I think the most time, if someone's not usually home or whatever during the day, or maybe they only are on the main level and not the basement, the levels that we're giving you are the worst case scenarios when we're able to test in the basement, right? And so everyone's risk factor is going to be different with their immunity and how they spend their time. So the risk is going to be higher if someone's got a bedroom in the basement and they're sleeping in the basement, obviously. So you're spending, 8 hours for sure down there, if not more, on a regular basis. And then, or maybe you have a home office in your basement kind of thing, and you are down there a lot. And then if it's not a basement scenario, it could be, the main floor. And you don't know, everybody's different with their risks. Okay, the risk factor is what I'm saying, and we don't know what we've breathed since we were little. So maybe they didn't have a lot of exposure to radon early in their history or anything. So yeah, it's one of those things that I understand that from the seller's point of view, but the buyer's point of view is I want to know that my home is safe. So we go through the process of home inspections, right? Home inspections are great for the mechanicals and the structure of the house, but we need this kind of stuff for radon testing and other things like water or even mold or asbestos, to know that our home is actually safe from the environmental factors. So it's the biggest purchase of a lifetime, and we want to know it's safe. Anybody else?
I had a question. So that system that he was running in the video seemed really loud. Do you know, are they loud, the mitigation
They're not that
system?
loud. No, that was a very closed space, and he was
Okay.
putting a pretty big suction through there to just show you that. Yeah, no, they're not that loud at
Okay.
all. It would sound much like maybe your refrigerator, kind of something with a small hum in the background. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I did have somebody asking, is there any way that we could have access to the slides from your PowerPoint?
Sure, I can email them on over to you at the board, and you can distribute it to the email list from today.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions, anything for Dawn? I've had probably a handful of people saying that you did a great job. They're grateful for this information that you provided. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
Well, it was my pleasure. I'm going to post later to the website, and I can send it along with. Oh, can you see that? Ooh, okay. So the state of Indiana, the State Department of Health is doing a coloring contest for National Radon Month this year, and the deadline is March 5th. So kids can win $250 for themselves, and then $250 towards their school. So that's the first place prize, to just color a poster that talks about radon testing. And so I will just post that to our Facebook page, and I'll also give it to Carlin to send out to you guys with the slides. Maybe put a sheet up at your office or whatever. If you know a little kid, that it says they're limiting it to 9 years old to 14-year-olds. I'm not sure why. But maybe the ability of reading it or something, I don't know. But they like to do a poster contest every year. But wouldn't that be really cool if someone from Michiana was able to win, a little kid was able to win $250 for themselves and their school? So that's put on by the State Department of Health and the American Lung Association. So I'll just pass that along to you. I think that's really cool.
Perfect. Yeah.
But anyway, it was my pleasure. I love teaching on this. If you guys ever need help in a transaction, kind of understanding a radon results or what happened in a report, or negotiating something, like how do you talk to these people, you know, your buyer or seller, we're there for you. You can always call our office in Mishawaka anytime. You know, you can contact me. That's great. Happy to help.
All right, well, thank you, Dawn, and for providing all this valuable information to our members. And if anybody goes out today, be careful with the snow and everything. Otherwise, we will hopefully see everybody again in another one of our educational events soon.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thanks, guys. Well,